step away from the car. Hands up now.
I live here. This is my vehicle. What crime do you suspect?
Don't get smart. Turn around. Hands behind your back.
You're detaining me without reasonable suspicion. That's unlawful.
The blue lights washed over the concrete walls of the condominium garage, slow and rhythmic, turning parked cars into silent witnesses. The night air smelled of oil, rain-soaked asphalt, and distant trash from the alley behind the building. A woman stood beside a silver sedan, one hand resting on the door handle, the other holding a set of keys that reflected the flashing lights. "You need to step away from the vehicle right now." She turned her head slowly, not startled, just tired. "I live here, officer. This is my car." The officer took one step closer. His voice was firm, rehearsed. "I said step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them." The garage was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the crackle of the police radio on his shoulder. Somewhere above them, a door slammed. A television flickered behind a window. Someone was watching. She raised her hands slightly, the keys still visible between her fingers. "I am complying. But you have no reason to detain me. I just pulled into my own building." Ooh. The officer glanced at the car, then back at her face, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "We got a call about a suspicious person in this garage. You fit the description." "What description?" she asked calmly. "A black woman unlocking her own car." His jaw tightened. "Mom, do not get smart with me. Where do you live?" "Unit 3B, she nodded toward the elevator. "I can show you my key fob. The car is registered to me." Instead of backing off, the officer reached for his cuffs, not pulling them out yet, just letting the metal clink softly against his belt. "I am going to need to see some identification." She exhaled slowly. "Officer, I will show you my ID, but I want it noted that I am being detained without probable cause." That sentence changed the air. The officer straightened. His shoulders squared. Most people did not speak like that. Most people were afraid. Around the corner, a door cracked open. A phone camera appeared, held chest high. Another resident stepped closer, pretending to look for their car, while angling for a better view. The officer noticed. His voice dropped sharper now. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back if you do not comply." For the first time, her eyes hardened. She did not raise her voice. She did not move. "Am I under arrest?" "You are being detained pending investigation." "Investigation of what crime?" He did not answer. The silence stretched. The lights continued to pulse. Red, blue, red, blue. In that moment, this was no longer about a parking garage. It was about power. About assumption. About how quickly a routine evening could turn into a confrontation that would change careers, reputations, and cost a city millions. And neither of them knew it yet, but one of them had just made the worst mistake of their life. The night in the garage freezes, and the story pulls backward in time long before the blue lights and the radio static. Long before a uniform decided who belonged and who did not. Her name is Judge Alana Brooks. She is 48 years old. She wakes up every weekday at 5:30 in the morning, not because she has to, but because discipline carried her here, and she does not abandon it now. She grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the daughter of a school cafeteria worker and a long-haul truck driver. There was no money for tutors, no family legacy in law. There were library cards, secondhand textbooks, and nights spent reading under a buzzing kitchen light while her mother slept before an early shift. She worked 2 jobs through college, one at the campus library, one cleaning offices downtown after midnight. When she applied to law school, a counselor told her to be realistic. She applied anyway. She graduated anyway. She clerked for judges who tested her harder than anyone else in the room. She learned to speak precisely, to choose words carefully, because in court words become weapons or shields depending on who is holding them. As a federal prosecutor, she handled cases that never made the news: civil rights violations, housing discrimination, unlawful searches that ruined families quietly. She watched officers lie on reports. She watched defense attorneys miss details that changed lives. She learned something essential. Authority rarely announces itself with cruelty. It wears calm faces and polite tones. When she was appointed federal magistrate judge, the ceremony was brief. Her parents cried. She did not. She understood the weight of it. She signed orders that sent people to prison and others back to their families. She ruled on warrants, on detentions, on probable cause. She knew exactly what those words meant because she had seen what happened when they were abused. The condo where she lives is not extravagant. Brick exterior, underground garage, security cameras that work when they want to. She chose it because it was close to the courthouse. Because after 14-hour days, she wanted silence. A place where she could exist without explaining herself. The officer did not know any of this. Officer Daniel Reece joined the department 12 years ago. He tells people he wanted to serve. His file says he wanted structure. He liked rules when they bent in his favor. Early evaluations described him as proactive, aggressive, street smart. Words supervisors use when complaints begin to stack, but no one wants to say why. There were complaints. A traffic stop where a black driver was searched with no citation issued. A pedestrian stop that escalated without cause. Each time, internal review found insufficient evidence. Body camera malfunctioned. Witness statements conflicted. Reece learned the system well. He learned how far he could push before consequences appeared. He worked nights now. Fewer supervisors. Fewer questions. Calls labeled suspicious person were his specialty. Vague calls. Calls built on feeling rather than fact. He told himself he was preventing crime. He never questioned why the descriptions always sounded the same. That evening, dispatch sent him to the condo garage. Caller reported a woman lingering near vehicles. No report of theft, no report of damage, just concern. Reece arrived already convinced he would find what he expected. When he saw her standing calmly with keys in her hand, something in his mind locked into place. Confirmation without evidence. He did not see a resident. He saw a challenge. When she spoke clearly, when she referenced rights, when she did not shrink, it triggered something deeper than suspicion. It triggered fear disguised as authority, the fear of being questioned, the fear of being wrong in front of others. He had been trained on probable cause, on reasonable suspicion. He had signed forms acknowledging those standards. But training without accountability becomes theater. You memorize the lines, you forget the meaning. As they faced each other in the garage, two histories collided. One built on survival through restraint. One built on power through assumption. The gap between them was not just legal, it was moral. Judge Brooks recognized it immediately. The posture, the clipped commands, the way his hand hovered near the cuffs instead of his notebook. She had seen this posture from the bench dozens of times. She had ruled against it. Now it stood 3 feet from her face. Officer Reece did not recognize her at all. He saw only what he expected to see. And expectation is the most dangerous evidence of all. What neither of them could see yet was how many eyes were already watching. Not just the neighbors filming quietly. Not just the cameras mounted to concrete pillars. But a system that would soon be forced to watch itself frame by frame, decision by decision. Because moments like this do not end when the lights turn off. They echo. They expose patterns. And sometimes they cost $3.1 million. The officer did not move aside when she pointed toward the elevator. He stepped into the line of sight instead, forcing the space between them to narrow. His radio crackled again, unintelligible but loud enough to remind everyone who controlled the moment. "I already told you," he said. "I need identification." She nodded once. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her purse, narrating each movement. "I am reaching for my wallet. My hands will stay visible." From the corner of his garage, a phone lifted higher. The red recording light blinked on. Another resident leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, pretending indifference while watching every second. Judge Brooks removed her driver's license first. She held it out flat between her fingers. The officer took it meaninglessly, glanced at it, then looked back up at her face. His eyes did not soften. "This address." He read it aloud. "This is here. Yes, that is why I am standing here." He looked past her, scanning the cars, the shadows, the concrete ceiling. He was searching for justification, not information. "I need more than that," he said. "Do you have proof you live here?" She reached back into her purse and produced a key fob. She pressed the button. The silver sedan chirped once. Lights flashed. Then she pressed another button. The trunk popped open. "Satisfied?" she asked quietly. Instead of answering, he handed the license back with 2 fingers as if reluctant. His jaw tightened. "I am still investigating." "Investigating what?" "A suspicious person call." She waited. "That is not a crime, officer." Behind them, a woman spoke up, voice hesitant but firm. "She has keys. I see her here all the time." The officer turned sharply. "Ma'am, this does not concern you." The woman stepped back but kept recording. "It concerns me when someone is being treated like this." Another voice joined in. "She just parked. What is the problem?" The officer felt it now. The eyes, the witnesses, the shift. His shoulders rose. His authority, once uncontested, was beginning to slip through the cracks of the concrete floor. Judge Brooks did not raise her voice. She did not argue. she simply continued. Officer, if I am not under arrest, I would like to go upstairs. You are not free to leave. On what legal basis? He hesitated. It was a fraction of a second, but it mattered. He filled it with volume. Failure to comply. I am complying, she said. I am asking you to articulate reasonable suspicion. That word again. Articulate. Reasonable. It was the language of courtrooms, not garages. It was the language of consequences. The officer's hand dropped to his belt. This is your last warning. Turn around. One of the residents gasped. Someone whispered, "This is crazy." Judge Brooks looked past him straight into the phone camera, now pointed openly at her. She spoke clearly, her voice steady. My name is Alana Brooks. I live in this building. I have shown proof. I am being detained without cause. The officer moved closer, invading the last inch of personal space. You are escalating this. No, she said. You are. The words landed heavy. They were not shouted. They were not emotional. They were factual. And facts, when ignored, have a way of returning with interest. The officer turned his body slightly, angling her toward the patrol car without touching her yet. His radio buzzed again. Dispatch asking for status? He ignored it. He was committed now. Backing down would mean admitting error. Error meant weakness. Weakness was unacceptable. Around them, the crowd had grown to 5, then 7. A man on the phone whispered urgently, I am calling a lawyer friend. This is bad. Judge Brooks felt the familiar calm settle in, the one she felt on the bench when attorneys unraveled their own cases. She knew the timeline forming, the reports that would be written, the video that would not lie. Officer, she said one last time, I am warning you, this will not end the way you think it will. He laughed once, short and humorless. Everyone says that. Then he reached for the cuffs. The metal clicked free from his belt. The sound was sharp, unmistakable. The garage seemed to inhale. Phones rose higher. Someone said, get this, get all of this. Judge Brooks did not pull away. She did not flinch. She turned slowly, hands moving behind her back, not in submission, but in strategy. As the cuffs closed around her wrists cold and tight, she looked straight ahead. She was no longer just enduring a mistake. She was documenting it. And the officer, surrounded by cameras, witnesses, and his own certainty, still believed he was in control. That belief would not survive the night. The cuffs closed with a dull, metallic snap that echoed against the concrete walls. Not loud, but final. The sound lingered longer than it should have. Cold steel pressed into skin, tightened one click too far, then another. The officer did not look at her face as he secured them. He looked past her, scanning the garage, aware now of the phones, the witnesses, the silence. Judge Brooks felt this pressure immediately. Not pain yet, just constriction. The kind that reminds you how quickly autonomy can be removed. Her shoulders were guided forward, not shoved, but directed with a firm hand between her shoulder blades. It was practiced. Routine. As if this were ordinary. The blue lights painted her shadow across the wall. Long, distorted. A resident whispered her name, though no one knew it yet. Another voice said, this is wrong. Someone else told them to be quiet. The officer walked her toward the patrol car slowly, deliberately. Each step measured. The concrete was damp beneath their feet. Somewhere above, a car alarm chirped briefly, then stopped. Life continued overhead, unaware. He opened the back door. The interior light flicked on, revealing hard plastic seats scratched and faded. The smell hit her next. Old disinfectant. Sweat. Stale coffee. She lowered herself into the seat, carefully, wrists bound behind her, posture straight despite the angle. The door closed with a heavy thud. Final again. For a moment, nothing happened. The officer stood outside the car, one hand on the door, the other resting on his radio. He turned slightly, blocking the view of the back seat from the cameras. His voice dropped as he spoke into the radio, reporting a detention. His wording was careful. Vague. Suspicious individual. Failure to comply. Inside the car, Judge Brooks stared straight ahead, the plastic seat pressed against her spine. The cuffs bit deeper as her muscles shifted. She tested them once gently, then stopped. She had already cataloged the details. Time, location, words used, witnesses present. The order of events was assembling itself in her mind, neat and precise. The car pulled out of the garage slowly. As they passed the ramp, she caught a final glimpse of the residents standing there, phones raised, faces tense. One woman mouthed, I am so sorry. Judge Brooks nodded once. The drive to the station took 11 minutes. No siren. No urgency. Just the hum of tires on wet pavement and the low murmur of the radio. The officer did not speak. She did not ask him to. Silence can be evidence too. She watched the city pass through the reinforced glass. Streetlights. Empty storefronts. A bus stop with 3 people waiting, none of them looking inside the car. To them, this was just another patrol vehicle moving through the night. At the station, the door opened again. Cool air rushed in. The cuffs were adjusted tighter now as he guided her out. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed. Shoes squeaked on linoleum. A desk sergeant looked up, then back down, expecting routine. "What do we have?" Suspicious person refused to comply. Judge Brooks stood still, hands behind her back, eyes forward. She said nothing yet. A female officer approached to process her. She was calm, efficient. She reached for the cuffs, paused and glanced at the name on the license clipped to the paperwork. Her brow furrowed slightly. She looked up, really looked this time. "You said she refused to comply." "Yes." The female officer hesitated. Just a fraction. "Enough." She unlocked the cuffs slightly to reposition them and felt the tension in the metal. Too tight. She loosened them 1 notch without comment. Judge Brooks felt the change and met her eyes. "Thank you." The officer nodded once, subtle, almost apologetic. As they walked down the hallway, Judge Brooks finally spoke. "Clear? Even. I want my attorney notified, and I want a supervisor present immediately." The male officer scoffed quietly. "You can make requests after processing." She turned her head slightly. "Officer, you are making this worse." He ignored her. In the holding area, the door closed again. Another echo. Another pause. The room was small. A bench bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. Recording everything. Judge Brooks sat down slowly, wrists still bound, and closed her eyes for a moment. Not in fear, in focus. She felt the weight of the night settle into something heavier than inconvenience. Something systemic. Something familiar from case law and transcripts now experienced firsthand. Down the hall, raised voices began to overlap. A supervisor asking questions, a name being repeated. The female officer speaking quietly but urgently. The cadence had changed. The officer who brought her in stood straighter now, less certain. He checked his watch. He adjusted his belt. He avoided the camera. Judge Brooks opened her eyes and looked directly into the lens mounted above the door. Her reflection stared back at her composed, restrained present. This was the moment injustice crystallized. Not loud, not dramatic, just procedural, documented, indefensible. And upstairs, somewhere beyond the concrete and fluorescent lights, the city was about to inherit a problem it could not explain away. The holding room door opened without ceremony. No knock. Just the sound of a latch releasing and footsteps that carried more weight than the ones before. 2 people entered. One wore a lieutenant's bars. The other carried a tablet pressed tight against his chest. The lieutenant stopped short when he saw her face. Not confused, not curious, recognizing. Judge Brooks stood slowly as the cuffs were finally removed. The red marks on her wrists were visible now, thin and angry against her skin. She did not rub them. She did not complain. She simply waited. Lieutenant Harris cleared his throat. "Judge Brooks, I am Lieutenant Harris. I need to apologize for what has happened tonight." The word apology hung in the air, fragile and late. She met his eyes. "We are far past apologies." He nodded once. He knew that tone. He had heard it in courtrooms. He had heard it from people who understood consequences. The man with the tablet spoke next, voice tight. "We verified her identity through the federal database. Alana Brooks, United States Magistrate Judge. Active appointment. Southern District." The words landed with quiet force. Down the hallway, Officer Reece froze. The blood drained from his face in stages. First disbelief, then comprehension, then fear. He stepped closer, trying to speak. "Lieutenant, I did not know." She refused to comply. Lieutenant Harris raised a hand without looking at him. "Stop talking." He turned back to her. "Judge, this detention should never have occurred. We are initiating an internal review immediately. You are free to leave." She did not move. "I want the names of everyone involved. I want the call log, the body camera footage, the garage cameras, and I want them preserved. Tonight." "Yes, ma'am. And I want your supervisor present when you explain to me why a vague, suspicious person call justified handcuffs." The lieutenant swallowed. "That will be arranged." Officer Reece stood, rigid eyes darting between them. The confidence that filled the garage hours earlier was gone. His voice cracked when he tried again. "I was just doing my job. Judge Brooks turned to him slowly. No. You were doing what you assumed you could get away with. Silence followed, heavy, documented. The female officer who had adjusted the cuffs earlier returned with her belongings. Purse, phone, keys. She handed them back carefully as if returning something fragile. I am sorry, she said quietly. Judge Brooks nodded. I know. They walked her out through a different door. Not the one with the bench and the camera. A side corridor reserved for staff and attorneys. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Outside, the night felt different. Colder. Sharper. The blue lights were gone now, just street lamps and the sound of traffic in the distance. Lieutenant Harris stood beside her as she waited for her ride. He offered again. We take this very seriously. She looked at him, then make sure it shows. Her phone buzzed, missed calls, messages already stacking. She scrolled once, then locked the screen. There would be time for that. Not yet. Inside the station, Officer Reece sat alone at a metal desk. A supervisor asked him to write his statement. He stared at the blank screen. Words that once came easily now refused to form. Every sentence sounded inadequate. Every justification thin. He had thought the mistake was stopping the wrong person. He was wrong. The mistake was believing the system would protect him when the person he detained knew the system better than he ever would. As Judge Brooks stepped into the waiting car, she looked back once at the building behind her. Brick, glass, flag still hanging by the entrance. It looked the same as it had hours earlier, but inside something had already cracked, and soon the entire city would hear it. Under normal circumstances, it might have taken weeks. Red tape, bureaucracy, internal memos that sit on desks untouched, but not this time. Within 72 hours of Judge Alana Brooks's unlawful detention, the footage had spread across the internet. What started as a neighbor's phone video turned into national headlines. Federal judge handcuffed outside her home. Magistrate mistaken for suspect officer suspended. The image that circulated most showed her standing calm and restrained with red and blue light washing over her face and a voice off-screen whispering, she didn't do anything. By the end of the week, the city was no longer in control of the narrative. The Department of Justice issued a statement. Civil rights organizations released coordinated demands. The American Bar Association called the incident a constitutional failure at the most fundamental level. It was no longer just about one officer. It was about a department, a city, a system. The lawsuit arrived the following Monday morning, filed in federal court. 27 pages, clear, relentless, unlawful detention. Fourth Amendment violations, 14th Amendment equal protection, racial profiling, false arrest, emotional distress. The complaint named Officer Daniel Reece, his supervisor, the police department, and the city itself. Attached were 4 video sworn statements from 6 residents and internal records showing that Officer Reece had been the subject of 14 complaints over 7 years, 9 of which involved Black or Latino individuals. Not one resulted in discipline. Most were dismissed for lack of corroborating evidence. But now there was evidence, and it wasn't going away. Behind closed doors, the city attorney's office reviewed the complaint. They watched the footage frame by frame. They analyzed every spoken word against body cam audio. They compared timestamps. There was nothing to fight, nothing to twist. Every defense fell apart on impact. This is indefensible, one senior counsel said. We need to settle. Within days, a proposed agreement was drafted. A payment of $3.1 million. No confidentiality clause. No admission of wrongdoing, but everyone knew what the number meant. Judge Brooks accepted. Not because she needed the money, but because settlements have weight. Because 6-figure lawsuits raise questions, 7-figure ones force policy change. The city wired the first payment within 30 days. The check cleared. But the damage didn't disappear. Officer Reece was placed on administrative leave the night of the incident. 2 weeks later, following the internal affairs report, he was officially terminated. His dismissal letter was direct and scathing. Violation of constitutional standards, abuse of authority, failure to observe departmental policy, and conduct unbecoming of a peace officer. His police union refused to support an appeal. He hired a private attorney who advised him to walk away quietly. His law enforcement certification was revoked. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index. No department in the country could hire him again. The story didn't end with one firing. It triggered a full audit of the department's stop and detain policies. Body cam footage from previous cases was re-examined. Disparity reports were compiled and reviewed. What they found was damning black residents were 2.9 times more likely to be stopped without probable cause. In neighborhoods like Judge Brooks's, that number rose to 4.1. The city council, under pressure from the public and national media, passed a reform package in under 60 days. It included mandatory bias training, an early warning system for officers with repeated complaints, and a new civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Officers could no longer detain individuals based solely on vague, suspicious person calls without articulable suspicion of a crime. And then came the academy reforms. Footage of Judge Brooks's detention was incorporated into the city's police training curriculum. New recruits were required to watch the full 17-minute compilation, including the moment Officer Reece dismissed her ID, the way he avoided articulating suspicion, the point where he reached for his cuffs. Pause. Breakdown. Analysis. This, the training officer told cadets, is how you destroy your career and your credibility. This is what bias looks like in real time, and this is what it costs. The cost, of course, wasn't just financial. Reece's name became unsearchable without scandal. He moved states, deleted his accounts, told friends he'd been ambushed by politics, but no one believed him. Not after watching the video. Meanwhile, Judge Brooks returned to the bench. She issued rulings, presided over hearings, sat silently while attorneys cited case law she herself had helped shape. But she was changed. In an interview months later, her only one, she said, "This wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was the most predictable. I knew exactly what was happening, and I knew exactly how to prove it. Most people don't have that luxury. They just get humiliated and hope someone's phone is recording." And when asked why she settled instead of pressing for a public trial, she answered without hesitation, "Because I wanted policy, not pity." $3.1 million. One officer's career ended. A department restructured. A training manual rewritten. And a single woman who refused to be intimidated in her own parking garage changed how one city viewed accountability. This wasn't justice for everyone, but it was justice finally for her. Let's pause here. Not for drama, not for effect, but because this is the part that matters most. The part after the headlines, after the settlement, after the officer is fired and the check clears. The part where we ask what exactly went wrong, and more importantly, how do we stop it from happening again? Legally, the foundation is simple. What happened to Judge Brooks was a textbook violation of the Fourth Amendment. That amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The standard reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred or is about to occur. Not a feeling, not a hunch, not a vague report about a person who doesn't look like they belong. Let's be clear. Living in a secure building and unlocking your own car does not meet that standard. Showing ID and a key fob should have ended the interaction immediately. But it didn't. Because Officer Reece wasn't looking for facts. He was looking for confirmation of a story he had already decided was true. That's not policing, that's profiling. And profiling violates more than just the Fourth Amendment. It touches the 14th too, the guarantee of equal protection under the law. You cannot apply law differently based on appearance tone or perceived respectability. You cannot decide that asserting rights is suspicious. That calm disagreement is obstruction. But it happens, every day, in every city. Why? Because bias isn't always loud. It's not always burning crosses or shouted slurs. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, institutional. It's a gut feeling. It's the report that says suspicious person with no behavior attached. It's the officer who expects compliance, not questions, and punishes anyone who refuses to shrink. That's why this story matters, because Judge Brooks had something most people don't. Legal knowledge, federal credentials, a platform. She knew what to say, how to say it. She knew the law better than the man who detained her. And even then, she still ended up in the back of a squad car. So what happens to those without her resume? What happens to teenagers walking home, or delivery drivers in nice neighborhoods, or parents picking up groceries in the wrong zip code? Most don't get settlements. Most don't get justice. Most just get humiliated. And then they get silence. That's where we come in. If you're watching this, if you've made it this far, here's what you need to know. If you're ever stopped or detained without cause, keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Ask, "Am I free to go?" If the answer is no, ask, "What crime do you suspect I've committed?" Document everything. If it's safe to do so, record. If you're arrested, say, "I'm invoking my right to remain silent and I want a lawyer." Then stop talking. Do not argue law on the street. Argue it in court. And if you witness someone else being profiled, film. Stay calm. Stay nearby. Your footage might be the difference between a cover-up and accountability. But this isn't just about individuals, it's about systems. Departments need real oversight. Complaint histories need to be tracked and acted on. Body cam footage must be reviewed by independent boards, not buried. Officer training must go beyond procedure and into pattern recognition. Because bias isn't just a personal flaw, it's a professional liability. And the biggest lesson, credentials don't protect you. Respectability doesn't protect you. The Constitution doesn't protect you unless someone is willing to enforce it. That's why Judge Brooks spoke out. Not for herself, but for everyone who doesn't get the apology. Who doesn't get the 3.1 million, who doesn't get believed. And she didn't need justice, she was justice. Now it's our job to carry it forward. So ask yourself, if a federal judge can get profiled in her own garage, what hope does the rest of America have? And then ask the harder question, what are you willing to do about it? If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Use it. Let it teach. Let it change how you see your neighbors. Let it change how you see silence. Because silence is permission. And permission is how this keeps happening. Thanks for staying to the end. Now drop a comment. What's your biggest takeaway? What would real accountability look like to you? And if you believe this story needs to be heard, hit that follow. We're not done. We're just getting started.